How are you doing, Shabri?
Doing great, thank you, James. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Really buzzing for this event. I know this was an inspiration from you to get us to focus and elevate specifically the BDR and SDR manager function because it's become so important to the growth of SaaS companies in the UK, Europe, and the rest of the world. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight on why you decided that supporting the SDR leaders was such an important thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career as an SDR, and then I went through that leadership trajectory of becoming a team lead and a manager, and then a head of. And one of the things that I struggled with along that journey was the lack of dedicated support, community enablement for that role. It felt like I was being shoehorned into sales managers, and it's such a different type of role, managing and building an SDR team. So when I spoke to you about this, I was really, really keen, given the growth of this role in the UK and Europe, that we build something around that. So people have got a forum to meet and network with other SDR managers, but also we can have these events that we have these 7-minute talks where SDR managers are talking about things that are top of mind for them, and other people can learn from their journeys. So thanks for letting me twist your arm on this.
Yeah, I think this has become one of the world's most interesting events specifically for SDR managers and BDR managers. So we're really grateful for everybody that's signing in. Can you just chat to us in the comments and let us know you've arrived and you can see and hear us? So it's a bit scary when you're up here, but you can't actually see people. So we imagine you are sitting there comfortably with your slippers on. But whatever you are, whatever you're doing, can you just introduce yourself and let us know where you're dialing in from? Because I can see already there's 45 people of you live. So I'll start the introductions once I know that you guys are listening and you're there. Shabri, what's top of mind for you at the moment? Or maybe you can give us a little bit of insight about who SalesWorks are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So SalesWorks, we work in 3 main areas. We work with companies from startup to scale up, typically in the SaaS space, but across the 3 main areas that we see companies need help with. So the first is team development, which is ongoing training and coaching. The second is tech and infrastructure. So we've got our wonderful partners like Salesloft on this call today. So working with organizations to help them build and optimize their tech stacks. And the last is around sales enablement. So really helping companies with their strategy, playbooks, messaging. And so top of mind for us right now is really helping companies not just move the needle in one of those areas, but looking at how they can really help grow their teams. We're out of COVID, people are going back to the office, people are hungry to learn more. There's an investment in tech stacks. So we're helping companies right now prioritize, where to get the most bang for their buck, essentially.
Amazing. Fantastic stuff. Well, I'm really proud to have you as a partner. I'm really grateful for your support, and I'm glad that we've got this event pulled together. So I'm going to kick off with our first speaker. If you're new to Sales Confidence, this is your first time, just write newbie in the chat so we know that you're a newbie. And if you've been before, maybe you can say how many times you've been on a Sales Confidence event before, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or maybe even 6 and above. So the format of Sales Confidence events is very simple. We get 4 or 5 of the top speakers in the world to deliver a 7-minute talk where they get to deliver actionable, practical, and insights based on their experience as an SDR leader. So each speaker gets 7 minutes, and at the end of the 7-minute talks, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions where Shabri will host a panel. And this is best opportunity for you to ask questions throughout the event, and then Shabri will gather those for the panel at the end. So what I'd also say to speakers who can hear me in the background, while you won't be able to answer questions while you're live, what I would suggest is be active in the chat if anybody asks questions, so you can respond to their questions live in the chat. So the chat is somewhere where you can be complimentary, be positive. Great to see Matt Christie, Darren, Claire, Phineas, Henrietta, Demi, Henry, all a bunch of newbies. And we've got people coming from all around the world, so that's fantastic. So I'm going to kick off with our first speaker, and then we get the ball rolling. Right, So the first speaker today we're inviting up is going to be Michael Willox, who is Sales Development Manager at Salesloft. He's going to be talking about hybrid working and moving forwards post-COVID now, challenges sales managers are facing and tools that you can use to support your sales team. Michael joined Salesloft in his current role as SDR Manager for EMEA in December of last year, and he started his career in sales with a partnership role, 8 years at International Foreign Exchange, and has since held roles at Fleetmatics, SLL Systems, Bizarre Voice, and Fresh Relevance. So it's always difficult being the first speaker up, but Michael, you're live.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. We can hear you, so I'm going to leave you to it for the next 7 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, thank you for the introduction, James. So, as James said, today I'm going to be speaking about hybrid working. It's a topic that is, everyone's focused on at the moment, especially what's happened over the last couple of years. It's, how do we kind of continue this, and what does it look like moving forward? So today I'm going to be covering some typical challenges that I, as a manager, have faced and are still kind of facing, and also after speaking to some other managers, what they are facing. And then what we can do just to kind of keep our teams motivated within this new work model. So before we kind of get into the challenges, I think one thing that has become very clear is that, we're not going back to the old kind of 5 days a week in the office model. Employees and businesses have basically seen the benefits of taking a hybrid approach. And like it or not, this is, the new world of working. So when I speak about hybrid working and why it's important, what I mean by that is, the ability to allow your employees to work remotely or in the office as of when they wish. So 76% of employees have adopted this new way of working and will continue to do so. And then if we look within my team at Salesloft, around 85% of my reps will continue this hybrid working model. So in terms of, some of the typical challenges that, like I said, I have been facing and other managers, number one is really around the kind of visibility on what reps are doing. Now, for me, this has been mainly around like new reps, hiring during COVID. It's not necessarily based on the trust element. Everyone that I hire, I do trust. It's more around me as a manager, just kind of feeling, am I doing enough to support them and do they get it? And then this kind of goes into the next point is, just struggling to keep reps motivated. Now, there's quite a few SDRs on the call. And if you're an SDR during COVID, from what I've been hearing, it's very, very tough to get yourself motivated, making cold calls from your bedroom or living room. It's tough to do, especially if, you're in a house share or you're at home with your parents. It's just having people there. It's just very, very hard to kind of get yourself motivated to make those calls. The next point is communication. Now, whereas before, when you're in an office environment, you could literally walk up to someone's desk, whether that be your manager or a peer, you could walk up to them and literally just ask them a question. Now that everything's done over Slack, it's, people's calendars are busy and you have to, literally say to them, can I get 5 minutes of your time when you're free to ask you a very, very simple question, which before, when in the office environment, it was answered within kind of 30 seconds. Now, number 4 is, around culture. Building and maintaining a culture has now become an even bigger ask when you're trying to build a team remotely. So as a manager, you're faced with, okay, I can see what the reps are doing. Do I need to be doing anything else? Am I doing enough to kind of keep them motivated? And then the last point in some of the challenges is just the overall lack of engagement you get, especially over Zoom or other video meetings. As a manager, it's very, very frustrating when you're cascading something down or you're presenting something to your team on a Monday morning, cameras are off, lack of engagement, and no one's interacting. And it's a challenge because you don't know how much of that has gone in and, if they've kind of understood that. So with those challenges, what can we do as managers to keep our teams motivated? So one thing I've got down here is, communicate the team goals and the company vision to your team. So one thing I like to do is to give your reps basically a full picture of not only their targets, they know their targets, but the team targets and also the business targets, and also why these targets are the targets. So I take the business number, the overall business number, whether that be pipeline or revenue, and then work backwards with the SDRs just to make sure they understand what impacts they're having on that business number. Number 2 is set clear targets and hold them accountable. Now, this ties in very nicely with the communication side, and this does become easier once you have communicated the overall kind of business targets. Number 3, set high expectations. Your expectations moving forward, that could be what I mentioned before in one of the challenges. That could be a camera on in meetings, high level of engagement within the team, as well as their activity numbers and what's expected of them to kind of get to their number. Now, the next one is around kind of create that competitive environment. If you want to keep your team motivated, spiffs are a great way of doing this. One thing that I've implemented at not just Salesloft, another company, is, when you're doing these cold calling blocks, get everyone to join. And then when someone, connects with a prospect, everyone joins that call. I'm not here to pitch kind of different tech that does this, but you can kind of guess the ones out there that do. The next one is around, providing that ongoing one-to-one coaching and team sessions. One thing that I've learned over the years is a one-to-one is the rep's time. It's that use that time to make sure they're always learning. One thing that I've been doing is, I get the reps to send me cold calls or discovery calls before, at least 24 hours before our one-to-ones. I then listen to that and then we analyze it together in their one-to-one. Or if they mention something else, focus on those areas, and then you can put team sessions in if it does become a popular topic. Number 6 is one of my favorites. It's buddy systems. Buddy the new reps up with more experienced reps, or align SDRs with AEs. It's a great way to not only hold them accountable, but to keep that kind of on that one-to-one coaching. So that's kind of it in terms of what I'm discussing. But 3 key takeaways that I've got: buddy systems, align newbies with the experienced reps, and this will help with the development and motivation. Number 2 is, once you've communicated the team goals and wider vision, it will become a lot easier for you to set clear expectations with your reps. And number 3, to keep reps engaged, create a healthy competition across the team. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Michael. Brilliant. And I love the 3 takeaways at the end. And I can see we've already got some questions that we'll definitely love to pick your brain on when we get to the Q&A. So thank you very much, Michael. Okay, next up we have Cara Pepper, who's one of our sales training leads here at SalesWorks. Cara is actually in the airport right now in the US. So we have Cara's talk recorded, but she is also here in case you want to drop her any questions in the chat. So Cara is going to be spending the next 7 minutes talking about coaching to discover, not interrogate. So Cara is going to be sharing some ideas on using the discovery format to support effective coaching. But Cara started her sales career in travel and hospitality in 2018 before working as a sales leader in the fintech industry, which is really where she found her love of training and development. From there, she became a sales coach for SaaS businesses, and she's really passionate about using her varied experiences to create and deliver invigorating yet digestible training. And that's really because she's able to communicate the science of sales and how to practically apply theory with each person's unique flair. So I was lucky enough to hire Cara last year. So she joined SalesWorks, having previously been a sales coach and sales leader. And we will bring up Cara's video now.
Over at SalesWorks. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about coaching your reps to discover, not to interrogate. So why did I choose this topic? Sales coaching may be the most important thing a sales leader can do to enhance the performance of our sales reps. It can be used to enhance training, provide more understanding of the individual rep, and ultimately improve performance. Unfortunately, however, it is easy for us to lose focus in our coaching sessions, not prioritize them, or run into some fundamental mistakes, such as over-focusing on the negative, having too many focuses and no real priority, sharing the what, but not the how and the why, and telling, not understanding. Coaching should be the key to unlocking a person's potential. It's helping them learn, challenging their way of thinking rather than giving the answers. How you run your coaching sessions will directly impact the sales rep's performance. So imagine the situation. You turn up to your coaching meeting, you run through a few obligatory questions, then you spend the rest of the meeting telling the rep all of their issues and telling them what they should do, ultimately leaving them feeling more confused and negative about their current situation. How do you think this will translate into their own meetings? Most likely, they will turn up to the discovery, ask the obligatory qualifying questions, and then tell the prospect all the issues they assume that they're facing, give a standard pitch, and ultimately leave the prospect feeling confused and negative about the situation. So what's the solution? Coach your reps how you want your reps to sell. Why? Because not only will this gain greater insight into the pain points and how we can help them, but in turn they will understand the feeling we want our prospects to experience. So now I'm going to run through a bit of a how-to guide, how to plan, gain commitment from your rep, discover, and then the next steps. So firstly, we start with the plan. We all know that an effective discovery starts by being prepared. So gather the data. There should be a mix of quantitative as well as qualitative. Review those calls, so listen to them, shadow them. Differentiate. So what is the current reality of the individual and what is their potential? Where do they sit within the team? What is their current tenure and experience level? Highlight successes as well as developmental points. Pick a focus, something that is a priority, but also easily digestible. And then we come to learnings. What do you need to understand from the rep around that focus point? And then finally, what outcomes and accountability might we suggest our reps start with? We then tailor this to the rep by understanding their motivations and understanding their personality style to ensure that open communication. This will give clarity and direction to your meeting. Also in this pre-meeting stage is where we gain a deeper level of buy-in from our rep. So the best way to get someone not to do something is to tell them what to do. This is especially prevalent when it comes to your more seasoned reps. They aren't going to respond well to being ordered. You will enjoy a much higher rate of success if you involve them in the process. So ensure they understand the why of sales coaching, not just the how and the what. So this starts before the call. Have the rep evaluate their own performance and bring a focus point that they would like to improve. Set expectations of what you would like them to review ahead of the meeting dependent on their experience level. For your more junior reps, you might want to give them guideline areas to look at, the metrics, the improvements, the successes. Then we come to the meeting. As you open the meeting, you want to put in that upfront agreement. So set the agenda. Highlight this as a space for their improvement. Outline what the meeting will include, what will be discussed, so the successes, the focus point, the developmental areas, and the outcomes. Get their consent and commitment. Once you have that consent and commitment, we can start the discovery phase. Here we're seeking to uncover and understand. This includes understanding their success as much as their developmental areas. Follow a very similar framework as you would for the discovery. So typically this starts with situational open questions. Have them outline their understanding of their current situation. What did they find from that self-evaluation? What are they proud of? What could they improve? What was their biggest win? And what is their biggest challenge? You're looking to grasp a surface level of idea of what they understand their situation to be. We can then focus our questions to uncover and probe into that pain. So let's say you've used a couple of calls and your focus point is their questions. You feel that their current level of questions is not allowing them to gain the insights they need to establish value with their prospects. So here, for example, you might ask, how do you feel about your level of questions currently? We can then start to dig into that issue and intensify it. So we might ask, what level of answers are you receiving to your questions? Why do you think that is? How do you feel about asking open, difficult questions? Okay, why is that? Here we want the rep to understand the impact and consequence of their current behaviour. This is where we can help them understand why this is important and start to challenge their own way of thinking. Now we've uncovered and understood the problem behind the issue, we can start to build a vision of where we would like to be. What could success look like and what are the steps to get there? So how about we work on improving your confidence? How would it sound if we had more training around business acumen? What steps might we take? Here we can offer some suggestions and some targets. And then finally close the meeting. So as for the sales call, it typically has 3 steps. So summarize. Clarify that you both have the same perspective and understanding. This will make sure that the rep feels heard, cements that level of a trust, and ensures you're both on the same page moving forward. Second, questions. Ask if anything's unclear, and open up if there's anything else that they would like to use this time to discuss. And then set next steps. So set tangible goals. What steps will they take? What steps will you take? How will you measure the outcomes when you reconnect to discuss? So we've looked at a framework for how we can shape our coaching session. Now here's just a couple top tips for you to really enhance that. So watch how much you're talking. What do you recommend the talk time for your reps be in a discovery conversation? Probably less than 50%, right? Ask open questions. So use the TED framework. Tell me about the situation. Explain the impact of. Describe how you'd like to proceed. Have a recorded call to unpick and emphasize points. Focus on one improvement at a time. Don't forget to understand success in the same way and how you can further develop that. Practice radical candor. Understand what the long-term goals are for their development. Are you working towards that goal? And remember to focus on the why, then the how, and then the what. Thank you for having me speak today. It's been a pleasure.
Amazing. Thank you to have Cara there, and she's going to be available as we go through these talks on the panel later and available to answer any questions. So do ask your questions. I see Dominic is making a point. There's also some questions in the Q&A section, so keep those coming. So next up, we've got Dave Sherry, who is the Senior Manager of Business Development and Sales at Gong. Gong have just landed in Dublin in EMEA and making some huge inroads and progressive decisions on growing their team. Dave first joined the SaaS industry in 2014 when he joined AdRoll as a commercial account executive before moving up as a senior account executive. From there, he joined Amplitude, where he eventually became head of sales development and interim sales manager before he joined Gong in his current role at the end of last year. Dave also founded Land and Expand, a sales and EMEA marketing advisory firm for developing SaaS salespeople. That was something that actually attracted me to Dave in this conversation, was that he's actually had some experience of consulting a numerous business on building different teams. So I'm really lucky to have Dave with us today, and over to you, Dave.
Thanks very much, James, and thanks everyone for having me. I'm gonna 7 minutes is a short time for me, for those who know me. So those who are visiting today and watching this today, you have missed out on my poorly executed dad jokes, but you are at the mercy of looking at this background behind me, which is typically blurred. But on the Hopin platform, I'm not sure how to blur my background. Anyway, to crack on into it, as James alluded to, I've been blessed to work with a number of companies that have started their journey in Europe, in Dublin and Amsterdam, where I previously lived. And I've been lucky to be part of that journey from a very early stage. So the topic of team building is very, very important to me. And in my current role at Gong, I'm going from a motion of growing the team from, it's going to be increased by 500% in terms of headcount this year. And so thoughtful team building is very important to me. And I'm sure it's very important to a lot of SDR, BDR managers as well, about how can we make sure that we're bringing in the right folks to the team that are going to be set up for success and are also going to contribute in a very impactful way to our business. So I'm going to bring you through a three-pillared approach that I've kind of landed on right now, and that I continue to kind of update every kind of like 6 months to make sure that I'm being honest in my performance in that area. And I'm going to go through that with you today. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and if someone can confirm in the comments, that would be helpful. Maybe, do you know what? I'm actually going to leave it. I'm just going to go on the fly as any good AE. Okay. Perfect. So the three-pillared approach is made up of 3 pillars, as I mentioned. The first is candidate profile. The second is the non-negotiable characteristics of candidates. And then thirdly is the unified team. So the first, candidate profile. And again, this 3-pillared approach is the outcome of my own firsthand experience of wins and failures that I picked up along the way. It's the output of extensive kind of feedback that I've gotten from managers and colleagues around me, having those short feedback loops. And I've also taken a lot of influence from some of the more reputable material out there from sales leaders in the form of books and blogs and so on. So the first pillar, candidate profile. So I've broken the candidate profile into 2 persona types that I would typically look for in SDRs: persona 1 and persona 2. Persona 1 is typically that SDR candidate who is at the very early stages of their career. Perhaps they've just recently finished university, or this is going to be their first job out of school, for example, but they have shown traits to show that they are cognitively strong or have entrepreneurial interests and so on. And typically you can actually ascertain that from a LinkedIn profile or a CV. So it's folks who've done a good job at achieving strong grades in university, or it's folks who've actually tried things. They've put together charity events, or who have tried entrepreneurial projects and initiatives and so on. And ultimately, with that persona type, we're trying to find those kind of A players for the business further down the line. So those future Hall of Famers for the business. And then persona 2 is an SDR candidate profile who is a bit further along in their career. Ideally, someone who actually has a bit more functional experience in the form of working in a BDR or SDR role elsewhere, but is looking for a new challenge or a new type of company to work with. Those folks will have a stronger sense of business acumen. They will be a bit more polished and having gone through some training or some onboarding. And those folks we can expect to, drive a better ROI and ramp quicker for the business versus those kind of persona 1 types. Typically, what I would look for is to have 3 persona 1s. Have 1 persona 2 for every 3 persona 1. So that would be the typical ratio. Second, we have non-negotiable characteristics. And a lot of this is influenced by one of my favorite books, which is The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon. There are 3 characteristics that I would really look for in an SDR candidate. The first is urgent curiosity, and not just a candidate who's curious about being an SDR or curious about the space that your technology or your product is operating in, but it's those folks who are bringing this urgency and this kind of thirst for knowledge and thirst for intellect into the interview process when you meet with them. So it's those folks who've researched a lot about you before coming into the interview. They've researched the breadth and depth of your product and the landscape where your product operates in. And it's those folks who just really have this kind of urgent curiosity that they are giving off in the interview process. Second is coachability. It's not only those folks who have the self-awareness to self-diagnose with the areas that they're doing well in and areas not so well in, but it's really important that these folks are able to take on board coaching, that they seek feedback, that they seek those short feedback loops around them and what they're doing, and applying those into their process to help them get better. And then the third characteristic that I would look for is a candidate who has this intrinsic motivation, this deep desire to work in a role that is measurable and that is accountable, that they are going to be held accountable, to a larger kind of team goal. And that's a perfect fit for SDR. So it's those folks who really want to be measured and in a role that they are in control of their fate and their output, and so to say. So those 3, again, urgent curiosity, coachability, and desire for measurability and accountability. And the last pillar is a unified team. So once we've set a strong foundation of SDRs and the team continues to grow, we want to make sure that we have a great subculture within that team so that the existing folks and new folks can blossom and continue to go from strength to strength. So what are the 3 things that will make up a unified and just a high-performing team? I've taken a lot of influence from another one of my favorite books, which is The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, in that a high-performing team needs to have an environment where folks feel that they are safe, that they're psychologically safe in their role, and that they're comfortable working in their role and with others around them. Secondly, that there is a sense of shared vulnerability, that folks are comfortable to be vulnerable in front of each other. And I think as a leader, it's really important for us to show that vulnerability as much as possible to ensure that folks know that they can be vulnerable. And then the last piece is establishing purpose through a common goal, making sure that we all feel unified about this common direction that we're going to, and making sure that the path to get there is clear. So my timer didn't work on my phone, so I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but just to sum up, I have a 3-pillared approach, which is the candidate profile, the non-negotiable characteristics of candidates, and then thirdly is how to build a unified team. this is the plan that I have. I look into this plan every 6 months, and I will review that with my manager and make sure that this plan is in line with the growth plans of the business, and making sure that we're successful in bringing in the type of folks who are set up for success, that they're being successful, and the function is being successful. And I think this plan is paramount to building a successful team. So hopefully that was helpful. And if you have any questions, please save them for the Q&A. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave. I love that. And the Qualified Sales Leader is the next book on my list. I've written that down. So thanks for the recommendation. Okay, next up we have one of our sales confidence friends joining. So we have Sean Hayes, who's the Director of Business Development for EMEA over at Aircall. Sean's held a number of roles at startups, including Lantum and Too Good to Go, gaining experience managing sales teams while closing short cycle and enterprise deals. Sean joined Aircall in 2019, really excited by the project and the opportunity to grow and manage the team in a hyper-growth scale-up. Since arriving at Aircall, the business development team in Northern Europe has increased their quota attainment by nearly 100%. And I know they opened an office recently in London, so really making waves in the SaaS tech space in the UK. Great to see you and great to have you here.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for describing me as a friend of sales confidence. I like that. I'll put that on my LinkedIn.
You can quote me as well.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. Perfect. I'll get going then. Hi everyone. So I'm here to talk about building the SDR Career Path. I'll set the scene. It's 2020. We're a few months into the pandemic, and an SDR who had been at Aircall for about 6 months, they just started hitting their target quite consistently, and they came up to me. Well, they came up to me on Zoom and said, I would like to apply for a role as an AE. And I sat very calmly, of course, as you would, and a lot of things came into my head. They'd only been there for 6 months. They hadn't had any experience before. They were more experienced SDRs who were performing better, and they probably had a great set of competencies at that time. And these actually weren't important points. They were all superficial. What it made me realize was that maybe we'd done something wrong. So instead, I asked myself this set of questions. Had we set the wrong expectations for career path timelines? Had we not made it clear what competencies would be needed to move to AE or other roles for that matter? Were we not fulfilling a learning and development need in their current role? And finally, importantly, were we paying our SDRs enough relative to our AEs? So we went away and we looked at these questions in more depth, and we worked very hard. And the result, I honestly believe, I thought about this when I was writing it, but I honestly believe I will never be faced with the same scenario with an SDR again. Say it quietly, but I believe we might have cracked the SDR career path. So how did we answer those questions? Well, I'll go question by question. Firstly, had we set the wrong expectations for timelines? Short answer was yes. In the past, SDRs had moved to AE very quickly. This was dictated by business need. We were growing so quickly that there was often an immediate need for an AE. So we plucked our best talent and sent them to AE. And this had set a precedent that we now had to repair, if you will. And I say repair not because we wanted to hold SDRs back at all, but because it was the best thing for the SDR and the company. We actually tracked this, and we saw that quota attainment for AEs that spent more than 12 months in the role was 28% higher than those that spent less than 12 months in the first year. So in fact, we also saw that if you actually spent 18 months in the role of SDR, it was nearly 40% higher quota attainment in your first year as an AE, which is quite significant. So what we did was we introduced a minimum period that you must spend in the role. The period could be reduced if you had relevant experience in the previous role at another company. But by setting this base level of expectation, it meant SDRs knew exactly where they stood and what sort of timeline they should be working towards. And now the second question, have we not made it clear what competencies the SDRs would need for AE or other roles? And again, I'll be honest, we hadn't really made it clear enough. We knew the competencies that they needed to succeed in each role, but we hadn't aligned these competencies. So we created from this a competency framework, which meant each SDR knew exactly what they would need to work on in their current role to put themselves in a position to apply for the next role. We also built a scoring system for these competencies with a benchmark that you had to reach to progress. It kind of gamified the career path, which also, for the competitive SDRs, gave them something else to aim for, aside from just the demos that they were booking each week and month and day, hopefully. And the question of competencies actually links to that third question I mentioned before. Were we not fulfilling a learning and development need in their current role? Again, I'll say no. Honestly, we had a good thing going. I'm making it sound like it was shit, but it really wasn't. Yes, we were training. We were doing lots of training. We had one-to-ones, but there wasn't enough structure. So alongside the competency framework, we also built out a career development plan. So SDRs could work on these competencies week by week. In fact, 82% of SDRs in the UK said that they wanted more learning and development in their role. This was on a study that we did with Gong and SalesWorks. But Aircall surveyed our own SDR team last month. Only 2% said that they wanted more learning and development. I honestly believe the best way to maintain momentum in a career path is to maintain momentum in learning and development. But is that enough? Because finally, were we paying the SDRs enough relative to the AEs? And I feel like this might be the question that will probably make people sit forward a little bit more. There is so much that goes into pay in general, and you have to do benchmarking against other companies. There's the split of base and variable. I think all the BDR managers here, in a sense, are really competing for all the talent amongst ourselves, and pay can play a big part. But there is also the question that once you have this talent, is there too big a gap between SDR and AE pay? Or another way of looking at it, have you created a path that is long enough for an SDR to want to stay in their role for more than 18 months? For us, the answer at the time was no. The AE remuneration kind of meant monetarily, the SDRs always had one eye on AE. So what do? We extended the career path. We previously had 3 levels, but we added a 4th, which we called expert. I don't know if anyone's put that on the LinkedIn, expert, but and the expert level was reached after 18 months in the role on average, and it saw a great increase in base and variable. We also introduced a new equity grant for SDRs that reached this level. So basically meant an expert SDR could be earning as much as an AE easily or more. And what do we ask for those that reach level 4? We ask for a 12-month commitment, 12 months at least in the role, earning just as much as you would as an AE, continuing to develop the skills that will set you up for the rest of your career. And yes, the SDR role is that important, so don't undervalue it. And I'll finish on that point. If you don't create an effective career path with timelines, competency frameworks, career development plans, and fair pay, SDRs might start looking at the role as a stepping stone. And the SDR role should not be rushed. It's honestly the greatest opportunity that you can have to hone skills that will set you up for the rest of your career. I mean, I spent 2.5 years as an SDR before I ever did a demo. I was speaking to Richard Smith from Refract last week, and he spent 3 years in SDR. The SDRs really need to trust the direction of their journey rather than just the speed. And it's honestly your duty as a BDR manager to build a career path that means they can do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. That was really insightful. Some really practical tips on how you've gone about building out the SDR organization and that career path. And I think every SDR manager is trying to crack that, because I have no doubt, you know, this week or this month, and another SDR is coming to them asking for a promotion. So having that clear pathway, I think you're going to get a lot of questions as we go on. That might be one to publish as a post as well, some kind of blog post.
I need to get better at that. I will do.
Good man. All right. Thank you, Sean. See you in a bit. Right. So our final speaker before we go into the panel discussion. So remember, it's 7-minute talks from each of our speakers. We're having our final speaker now, and then we go into a panel discussion where you can ask questions. So keep your questions coming in the feed for our speakers, and Shabri will be leading that. But our last but not least is Mallory, who is the Director of Revenue Enablement of Demodesk. She's going to be talking about onboarding SDRs for retention and success. Working together with your enablement team to set up BDR for success and make your talent investment longer term. Mallory joined Demodesk as the Director of Revenue Enablement, where she manages and enablement sales reps to have effective customer conversations. And she's held roles at companies like Groupon, Glassdoor, Raidu, but made the transition at Demodesk due to the strength of the product. Mallory, it's over to you.
Great. Okay, we got the timer going. Yay. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for the introduction and all the great speakers before me. So I'm going to speak a little bit on the topic, like James said, of onboarding SDRs, what you can do to make sure your team ramps quickly, and how to make sure SDRs are set up for success from the beginning, which is going to help you retain your best talent. And I'm going to try to break this into 3 parts. So before onboarding, during, and then after. So before bringing anybody into your team, there's a couple things that you want to do. The first thing is to think about your overall kind of go-to-market strategy. So defining what good looks like. How are you going to measure success? What is the problem that your product is solving? Your sales process. And I like what Sean was saying about the career paths and the minimum period in the role. I think thinking about those things ahead of time and making sure that the whole leadership team is aligned on this is important before you start bringing a bunch of new hires onto your team. And then the second thing is to really identify what behaviors, activities, and results are going to be the most important. Because in a remote or hybrid environment, the emphasis should be on behaviors just as much as it is on results. So having some clear examples to share with the new hire so they really understand what that looks like is going to be important. So for example, if one behavior that's really important to you is that they're going to be super proactive about their learning and about their growth, have an example from someone on your team that has done that really well so you can show exactly what that looks like. And then during onboarding, so you can think about onboarding as like the minimum viable product. So what is the bare minimum an SDR needs to know to do their job? And then that's all that it should be. I think in a lot of cases, onboarding is viewed as this big event where they have to learn everything, and it's really going to be information overload, and they're not going to remember about 70% of what they learned in those first few weeks. So think about it as an entry point that then you can build upon and optimize. And like Sean was talking about with those competencies that you want to build, like that's going to be something that's going to take time. And so having that mapped out is going to be really great so that after onboarding, you can continue to grow and develop your people. So make sure you're covering only the most important topics on the role. So this is probably going to be a mix of like, what about the company and product do they need to know, the tools that they're going to use, the personas you're selling to, and then a little bit about the role itself. And you can structure this in a combination of, self-guided learnings, live and group trainings, having a team buddy, call shadowing, role plays, kind of mix it up during those first few weeks. So it's not just somebody sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. And then for everything else, just make sure that they know where they can go to find that information. And for kind of the most important things, if you can create a trigger, that's ideal. So for example, I was speaking to someone who's an SDR enablement leader, and he has a training session during onboarding called Interview Like Oprah. And it's all about the 5 attributes that make her a great interviewer, which relates directly to qualification and discovery. So that trigger is going to help your new hire really remember that when they get on the phone with a prospect, they're going to be thinking about Oprah and thinking about how they're asking the questions. And then finally, with the behaviors, activities, and results that you thought about before they joined, make sure that that's clearly communicated. And I think Michael at the beginning, he mentioned communicating expectations. So can't emphasize this enough. Take the guesswork out. If somebody's starting a new job at home, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. So as clear as you can communicate from the beginning, that's going to be super important. And then after onboarding, how can you as a manager make sure that your new hire is going to be set up for success, they're going to ramp, and you're going to retain them, and then you can build on those competencies. So I have 5 points. So one is take the time to get to know them personally. So in your very first one-on-one with them, just spend a little bit of time getting to know their background and their interests and their motivations, because people leave managers, they don't leave companies. So make sure that you're taking the time to invest in them. And this is also going to help you understand how to support that person and help them grow and get the best out of them and where they want to go in their career. The second is ideally set up a structure that can help minimize some of the noise for them. So for example, at Demodesk, we have a playbook ready for every type of customer meeting that they would have. So this already has the right structure and the content that the rep can use, because I don't really want them spending time, creating decks, putting together all these kind of admin things when the agenda, booking next steps, the reminder email, like some of those fundamentals, if you can build those in the structure that you're providing, so they don't have to think about it, then they can really focus on interviewing like Oprah. Number 3, prioritize coaching. So creating moments where you're showing, not telling. And Cara shared some great frameworks to use when it comes to coaching. But if you're going to shadow calls or role play or listen back to calls together, make sure that you're always asking for their feedback first, because this is going to help you understand, okay, are those core competencies really getting through? Like how are they perceiving themselves? And I think Dave mentioned how important self-awareness is. So this motion of, okay, we listen to a call together or I shadow a call, what's your feedback? That's also going to help you gauge what is their level of self-awareness. For those additional skills, take the chances when you can to leverage the rest of your team to train those additional skills and to really build on that MVP that came out of onboarding. So this is going to be a good way to really give recognition to other people on your team who have mastered something, and it's going to be a better way to reinforce things across the board. And then 5, make sure you're celebrating when you see the behaviors, results, and activities that you outlined during onboarding. I think we have a tendency to just focus on, kind of the wins and the deals, but give equal weight to those behaviors and the activities that are driving that, and make sure that that's very visible. Okay, where are we on time? Oh, shoot, I went over. Wrap things up. There's some things you can do before, during, and after. Okay, done.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mallory. I was certainly scribbling down a lot of notes there. So thank you very much. I'm sure the audience found that very useful. Okay. Cara is on her way to board a flight. So we just got the 4 of you for the Q&A. And we've got a lot of questions that I'd love to get to. So I'll start with Dominic's question. So Dominic's asking, what tips would you have for a startup building the first of its sales team? So what are the most important things to do? So let's say they don't have sales ops or sales enablement yet. Michael, I'll come to you first. What tips would you have for a startup building the first sales team?
The first thing I would do is understand the why and what. Why are you building it? I mentioned just understanding and working backwards from the overall targets, the business targets, and then match that to. There was a couple of the other guys just mentioned a couple of traits from SDRs and what you're looking at. I think when it comes to enablement, if you haven't got anything in place, I do think you have to take that on yourself. I've had to do it. It's very frustrating until you build out the enablement piece. But I think overall, you should be kind of leading that within the business, and then understand what you're looking to hire and then go from there.
Okay, brilliant. Dave, given your experience of building and advising companies on building their sales team, what would you add to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think taking like the SDR leadership hat off for a minute, if SDRs weren't in consideration just yet, I think when we look at like the sales team, I think it's important to bring in a profile type that can not only work in a capacity where they acquire new logos, but that they can actually effectively manage those logos as well. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback there. And so if we're purely looking at like sales folks, I think it's important to have folks who can acquire logos, but also have that kind of skill and muscle to manage those existing customers, because at that early stage of a company, at that infancy stage, it's so important to understand what those customers who've taken a risk on us, what they like and what they don't like about our product. And I think that so the kind of the scope of responsibilities of a salesperson needs to be very kind of wide and deep, so to say. But let's fast forward that and say that the company's beginning to hum now. We're getting customers in at a predictable and consistent rate, and we're looking now at introducing SDRs. I think it's really important to have an established onboarding process for those SDRs, so that their ability to hit that optimal level of where the business needs is as short as possible, but also that it's scalable as possible. And thanks to the plethora of tools out there in the ecosystem, we can really leverage tools and to make sure that tribal knowledge and additional knowledge is always kind of shared with new hires, and that onboarding process is scalable and it continues to evolve over time. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great stuff there from you both, Dave and Michael. Thank you. Okay, Sean, we've got a question from Becca, and Becca's asking, how often would you recommend managers and SDRs to review their competency progress?
That's a very good question, isn't it? It's at first we actually started doing it on a quarterly basis, and then we realized that we suffered way too much from short-termism, like what were the things they were dealing with in that moment, rather than actually something more progressive. So we now do it on a weekly basis. Literally, with the managers, actually have a 4-week structure of one-to-ones, where in each one they cover different aspects of the funnel, from like accounts that are going in, calls, emails, and then we have a full funnel analysis at the end of the month. And within each one, we kind of check on certain competencies each week and build quantitative and qualitative next steps for the following one-to-one. So it's like a constant ongoing stream. It sounds very over-engineered, but we're still tweaking elements of it, but it's working pretty well so far.
Okay, I love that you do it weekly. Mallory, what's your thoughts on how often you should be doing that?
I mean, I really love that answer. And I was thinking along the same lines of not, move. Oh, hi, bud. Okay, we have a guest visitor. Sorry, team, everyone. This is JoJo. She probably has nothing to contribute to this conversation, but she has joined. But I was going to say something kind of similar to Sean, like don't move on to the next competency until you really feel like they've grasped whatever skill you're trying to focus on. So don't try to do too much too soon. And if you feel like we need to focus on reinforcing something, spend some additional time on that before moving on to a new concept. Yeah. And some people will grasp some concepts really quick, and others it might take a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But I really like the structure, the framework that you're using, Sean.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I've seen companies before use, competency scoring, and actually then when I say, okay, well, what does it take to move up from a 1 to a 2, and what are you going to do to help them? I don't know, right? So it's actually not just the scoring part, but then it's how do you plug those gaps as well? So yes, some great insights from you. We've got the age-old question from Dominique around what is the general expectation for how long you should be in an SDR BDR role before promoting. And I know this is something that people tend to always wonder, right? So how long should they be in the role? And my thoughts are that it's not a time trigger, it's a performance trigger. So Michael, I know you've got a huge SDR team at Salesloft, so I'd be keen to know how Salesloft think about this.
It's such a, yeah, I mean, Sean kind of nailed it with it's a topic that as managers, you're going to have to try and answer all the time. I wouldn't put a time frame necessarily on it. It's about setting the expectations before you hire someone, because as a manager, the way that I look at it is I'm spending my time building them for their next role. So that's my job. And if I get 6 months out of them, 3 months they're in ramp. And then the other 3 months they're holding a full target. So technically speaking, I'm only getting 3 months out of an SDR.
Yeah.
So in my head, personally, I have 12 months minimum. And the reason that is because of the time and effort that I put into the SDRs through onboarding, training, etc. However, but one thing is to make clear is just setting that expectation from day one.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way that you think about how long you have them there for and how you can make that most effective. Okay, we've got a really interesting question from Henrietta. Sean and Dave, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And Dave, I've seen the stuff that Gong Labs are putting out, so I'm sure you've got some insightful data on this. Henrietta's asking another question that comes up a lot, which is how effective are you finding cold calling? Henrietta's team is heavily email-based, and they're finding it quite hard to find accurate phone numbers, given the fact they target e-commerce and fewer people are actually in the offices. So there's two parts to this question. The first is how effective are you finding cold calling? And the second is where do you find accurate phone numbers? So Dave, I'm going to get your thoughts on this first, please.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So truthfully, we're in quite a privileged position at Gong in that we are predominantly selling to go-to-market teams. And so the people that we are calling are either overseeing a team that are hammering out the cold calls or are very close to that team. And so they're when I say that they're a bit more receptive to it, maybe perhaps to other industries and other channels, I would think that they are. And I think a good indicator that our SDRs are doing a good job is when they actually get job offers on the phone. It can be worrying at times, but it does happen. So we're in quite a luxurious position now. I haven't always worked in environments like this. I've worked in environments before where we've been selling to engineers, data scientists, and so on, where it's been, where they haven't been the most receptive to cold calls, and and that was even during the kind of once kind of working from home was introduced as well. Look, I think the big thing is that we can, as SDRs, you can do your best to ultimately grab the attention of your prospects wherever they are across channels. And there's great tools out there to help us. Michael's here from Salesloft. They can help us do that across email, LinkedIn, cold call, whatever the case may be, right? I think if we are successful in connecting with folks on a cold call, there is nothing more intense. There's nothing more intensified in that attention grabbing moment than a cold call. And I think that is where the kind of true kind of like, dare I say, like sales character or ability to kind of execute on the spot comes out. And so I think something that I really encourage SDRs to remember that, yes, it can be daunting. Yes, it can be scary. Yes, you can stumble across your words, but acknowledge that angst and try and flip it and say, shit, this is actually really exciting. I'm not in a room in the corner with the no lights on hammering out accounts because I'm an accountant. No offense to accountants on the call. It is an exciting thing to do. All right. It's an exciting aspect of the role because it's quite volatile and it can go one way or the other way. And that muscle needs to be built. And the way that muscle is built by doing it more often. So yeah, I suppose I'm trying to go back to the first question. Sorry, the first question was, how do I find kind of, selling into, how do I find with regards to cold calls into the space that we're selling into? Again, we're in quite a luxurious position in Gong. But what I would say is even in the world that we are in, irrespective of what area you're selling into, just keep going with it. Keep going with it because it builds these skills and it builds this character that will stand to you in the rest of the career that you're in. So don't lose sight of that and give your pipeline generation strategy and opportunities the best ability to be successful by executing those calls. So the second question, I'll be far quicker answering it. Data is always the hard one, right? Like, how do you find data? And I think people are a bit more sensitive about people calling on their mobile when they've never engaged in a marketing campaign, for example. So we're using the likes of Cognizant for ourselves out here in Europe. Data quality is pretty good. But again, we've done a pretty good job at kind of building that marketing strategy to get those numbers. So we're but talk to me in 12 months and it might be a very different story when all the water's drained out from the well. So sorry, long-winded answer, but hopefully that helped.
No, that was good. There was some great stuff in there. Sean, what about you? I know your team are fairly active on the phones. How effective do you find cold calling?
We'd be very hypocritical if we weren't using the phone, weren't we? We're
I
phone
know.
system. So I'd echo what Dave said in terms of data. It's very important. I think in terms of diversifying your data sources can be really good as well. So we use Cognism, we use ZoomInfo, we try and get as much data as possible. And also when we're calling into different markets, we see where we get the strongest data for each market. Because we haven't got their number to be an excuse not to call, because we know that cold calling is the best route in, it's the most effective. Emails are really just a way of getting people on the phone. It all comes to the phone. We also sell to e-commerce, I'd say, and we find that probably the best route in is sometimes bottom up as well. So calling into the people who are on the sales or support lines directly, finding out their experiences, getting more information from them. Even if you can get a number from someone higher up, great. But often just that information can actually help you tailor your email. But again, it all comes through the phone.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a big believer in the phone. I think our buyers today, their LinkedIn inbox is flooded, their email inbox is flooded. I get 10 cold emails a day, but my phone doesn't ring that often. So I think, and Dave, you alluded to this. I think if the phone is used in the right way, it can be a pattern interrupt in itself, right? And I think, I think it's super powerful, and it's what we encourage the SDRs that we train and coach to do as well. Okay, we're going to go one more question. We've got a question on experiences, guidance on comp structure. So fixed, variable, OTE, negotiating stock options, but if possible, any perspective on UK versus US comp. So a lot in there, but we were talking about this before this event started around SDR bases and hiring and things like that. So does anyone want to volunteer on sharing some insights and experiences on fixed, variable, OTE, stock options, and UK versus US?
I could speak. I don't really have experience around the US. At my last company, I was looking into expanding the SDR team to the US, so I kind of understand the basic salaries around like New York and things like that. I think we've all seen at the moment that, especially at the moment, I'm hiring a lot for like a recruiter. As some SDRs are looking around 60K for the base, and some companies will pay that. So it all depends. It depends from the company to company, right? Based on budgets. All depends on that. The way that I would look at it is go out, do your research, and find out what the industry are paying, what your competitors are paying, and kind of base it from that, because that's the only way you're going to really attract top talent if money's involved.
Love it. Thank you, Michael. The salaries blow my mind, but
it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. That's like 1 year's experience as well, and then they're asking for that. So
it is. I'll echo that in terms of just hearing some crazy numbers, and I think it could be good to counter that by telling some stories in terms of those who are the highest earners in your company as well, and kind of outline the fact you do set realistic targets, or we do set realistic targets. If you can have a differentiator in your package as well, maybe I shouldn't tell what our differentiator is, but we also have a percentage of closing for the BDRs as well, for the opportunities that they book, which isn't standard practice and is uncapped. So if they book a 10K MRR deal, and they'll get a percentage of that, and that can really add up. So something that makes people dream as well, whilst also being realistic.
Yeah, to that, what you were saying there, Sean, I'm a big believer of that, of SDRs not only being comped out on kind of like opportunities created or qualified pipeline. It actually is having their comp tied to revenue that's closed as well. Look, I appreciate I think I'm a firm believer that if you can adjust the levers with kind of payout in the form of spiffs or comp to drive the behaviors that you desire, like it's a really effective lever to pull. But a lot of it depends on where you're at in your journey with your business. So let's say if you're a company starting from scratch in Europe or wherever the case may be, like naturally the behavior we want to get is as many logos as possible. So let's maybe tie comp to the number of opportunities and pipeline that we create in that kind of first phase of growth. But then naturally, once we've kind of got that consistent and predictable flow of logos coming in, maybe it's mid-market or SMB, and we want to start going into those larger segments, it can be a creative and effective thing to do to adjust part of the comp where they actually start paying out in the same way as Sean said to the end revenue. So the SDR has a vested interest in that the pipeline that they're generating is actually going to close and that there's going to be significant upside. So I'm a firm believer of adjusting comp to the behaviors that you need based on where your business is at in its growth phase.
Cool. I'm going to wrap it up there, I think. Thank you very much to Shabri for co-hosting today's event and for partnering up with us. And also thank you to our wonderful speakers, Michael, Cara, Dave, Sean, and Mallory. Round of applause. I'd love to have a drink with you all now, but unfortunately we've got to get back to our desks. This has been a wonderful event. For more information, you can watch back the full recordings on YouTube. So if you search Sales Confidence into YouTube, the recordings will be up within 48 hours. And also, if you visit www.salesconfidence.com, you can sign up to our membership, which is free, which gives you access to curated videos. I would recommend that if you're developing your SDR function, in need of training or consultancy, or looking at a full audit on what you can do, that you speak to Shabri and Cara about SalesWorks and what they can offer, because they're a super supportive organization. So once again, thank you, everybody. There is an opportunity now, if you're going to hang around, to head into the networking area. So there's a tab under the stage on the right, which says networking. We're going to finish this main event here, but what I expect is to have lots of conversations with people in the networking for the next 30 minutes. I feel more than ever, because a lot of us are doing this from home, it's really useful to get the networking in and just make some brief connections with people and do that on a friendly, fair basis, on a roll-up basis. So once again, thank you, everybody. And thank you for being involved in this Sales Confidence session. Cheers.
Thanks all.